So the college football video game is all the rage, and I frankly don't really care. We might get to some elements of like the idea, but we're talking with Matt Brown from Extra Points at Matt Brown EP. And there was a decision yesterday handed down by, I guess it was a district court judge, and I might have that wrong, in the Johnson versus the NCAA case, that on the surface feels like a major loss in a long line of major losses for the NCAA. But Matt Brown, in his newsletter today, kind of intimates that it might not be such a loss. So, Matt Brown, why isn't it such a loss when they're basically telling the NCAA that you're treating all these kids like employees?
Well, I mean, to be fair, the ruling didn't exactly say that. The most recent ruling in Johnson said, "Hey, we need a slightly different employment case test for college athletes. We got to send this back down to the lower court to reevaluate this because maybe not every athlete should be treated the same." But they did, refuse to dismiss the case and made it pretty explicit. Hey, we think that athletes should be able to bring lawsuits saying that they should be classified as employees. We think that there's a potential for that to be the case here. The reason that even though the bulk of the text is pretty sympathetic to the plaintiffs and very skeptical of the concept of amateurism, skeptical of the concept of a student athlete, is because by sending it back, this litigation, the timetable is going to be extended.
Right.
This took a year and a half to even get to this point. The case is probably now another year and a half from being completely finished, knowing that there's going to be appeals. And what the judges are sort of saying, and what the NCAA and Power Conference commissioners have really been saying for the past several years, is these are issues that we need Congress to address. The longer the courts take to address any of these issues, the better the chances are, legitimately, that a legislative solution will be possible for the NCAA and power conferences.
Matt Brown is joining us here on the Adam Gold Show, Extra Points, the newsletter. This is how I've been following this story. I've been critical of the NCAA and the major conferences for relying on people who are not inclined to ever help them because, frankly, they haven't really gotten any help from Capitol Hill or K Street. All the lobbying they're doing is really just wasted time and wasted money. Why will this time be any different?
Well, the difference is that we're not going to have the same Congress in a couple of months.
Right.
The NCAA's lobbying efforts here over the last couple of years have happened mostly in divided government, where it's not just, Democrats control the Senate and the White House, Republicans control the House, but the majorities in both of those houses are tiny, making it very difficult to build some kind of legislative coalition over an issue that doesn't neatly fall under partisan lines, is very technical, and is not something that is a major priority for very many lawmakers. But here's the thing. If we are just looking at the Cook political report projections of and the current polling of how things are going, and I'm not making a value judgment here one way or the other.
I get it.
What is the most likely outcome from this election is that Donald Trump wins, Republicans take somewhere between 53 and 55 Senate seats, and they increase their majority in the House. And when that happens, given Republican dominance throughout the federal court system right now, it becomes much easier for someone like Ted Cruz, who has proposed legislation that essentially solves these NCAA labor problems, to get that kind of stuff passed. The lawmakers who are most sympathetic to the NCAA's calls for a ban on athlete-employee classification are Republicans. And if they get unified legislative and executive control, suddenly it's such a pipe dream anymore.
There are college football fans all over the state of North Carolina right now that just changed party affiliation. I would submit only this, being also somebody who consumes news, that just because one party has all three, both houses and the executive branch doesn't mean they're going to pass anything, because not a lot got passed in the first part of the Trump administration the first time, and they had all three branches. They did get one major piece of legislation passed, but they didn't do anything else. It was kind of gridlock. But either way, I think there's something else that you pointed out in the newsletter that I think is the best element of this, and the smartest element, because it's more about common sense. Because to me, it's more about football and men's basketball and maybe women's basketball. The revenue sports should be treated differently than all of the other non-revenue sports, and I think the schools are probably terrified that it won't be.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and they do have reason to be terrified, because the original plaintiffs for Johnson were not NC State football players and Duke basketball players. They were FCS football players that are not anywhere close to cash positive generating programs. Dartmouth men's basketball, God bless them, draws fewer fans than most Triangle area basketball teams in high school.
Right.
Let alone college, right? And this is the thing that's been kind of, brought to my attention over the last 7-8 months from talking to people who work in this industry, is there are ways to make Power 4 football, men's and women's basketball athletes employees and keep most of the industry functions going. There's enough money going around. And we're going to see that with this House settlement anyway, and carving off $21+ million in direct payments. There's enough money to go around to make sure everybody gets a comfortable salary. Where you can't make this work is for Elon, or for anybody who runs track or swims. And I think there's good reason for administrators to be like, I don't know if the courts are going to make that distinction if the test that they're using is primarily centered on control, which makes sense, right? You can be an employee of an entity that doesn't make money. Lots of businesses don't make money. You're still an employee.
Right.
This means you're an employee of a crappy business. This is becoming, I think, a little bit more clear in how the judges are realizing maybe we need to use a scalpel here rather than a sledgehammer. A world where you have employment for some, amateurism for others, is probably the most common sense approach. But we'll see if legislators and the judicial system see it the same way.
Matt Brown, Extra Points. All right, can I just bring it to just introduce a different story here, because I want to get your take on this. There's a UNC tennis player, Reese Bierman, I believe is her name, and she's suing as a class action lawsuit now, suing the NCAA because they won't allow her to accept prize money at professional tennis events, even though she's a tennis player at UNC. She, I think, had to forfeit, $49,000 from advancing. Well, I'm not 100% sure if it was the U.S. Open or not, but regardless, it was a professional event. I have argued that if we're about to start directly paying players, and we allow NIL, I don't see the difference in allowing a tennis player to slap endorsements all over their shirts and their hats or whatever, get paid by Wilson or Yonex, whatever racket they're using, and not take prize money. I don't see the difference at all. Yeah, prize money is different than endorsement money, but there's still monies earned based on playing in a professional tennis event or a professional golf event. Nick Dunlap at Alabama should have been able to stay in amateur. Should have been able to stay at Alabama. Shouldn't have had to make the choice. He chose it. A lot more money. But is there a definite difference? Something that would divide the two in your eyes?
I mean, if you had asked me that question 12 years ago, I might have said there's a more clear line, but your argument here makes a lot of sense to me. And this is something that's actually been discussed in NCAA circles for the better part of 25 years, about whether you're really drawing this line in the sand is the most beneficial thing here for college athletes, because college athletics is supposed to be about educational attainment, and you want as many people to be able to go to college and participate in stuff as possible, and saying, oh my gosh, you can't get $10,000 if you happen to play out of your mind and win a tournament, seems silly, especially because, and to your earlier point, everyone's making money now.
Right.
I can tell you, but these are conversations that are happening in a couple of other sports. In the college hockey world, a reoccurring conversation has been about potentially expanding NCAA eligibility to hockey players who are playing Canadian high juniors.
Okay.
Which and most of these guys are barely making blessed money.
Right.
But it's a little bit of money, and the idea of these guys can't because they got a $200 meal stipend and a bus to Medicine Hat. Can't play, but the left winger on Boston College, who's got $100,000 deal with a stick company, can. It feels dumb. I honestly, if it were me, I would make this even more expansive. I would even be okay with saying, hey, freshman basketball player at NC State, go pro, go play in Barcelona for a year, and if you decide you're not good enough to play in Europe, come back and still have 2 years eligible in college. Like the clock starts once you enroll,
right?
And if you want to come back to college, in those 4 years, go for it. If you want to spend 2 of those playing basketball in Greece, and there are administrators who have pitched that same thing. I know golf and tennis, like their governing bodies have to have different rules about this sort of thing, but I don't really see a meaningful difference.
Yeah, and here's the thing, and I've been saying this for a long time, and I know people get kind of annoyed when they go, I've been saying this for a long time, but I have. If you allow athletes in college to earn money, then they actually have a better chance of staying around in college rather than turn pro for financial reasons, which probably, I say probably, definitely, enhances the college product. How much more interesting would college swimming have been had Katie Ledecky stayed in it? Had Michael Phelps ever been in it? Had Michelle Wie ever been in college golf? She went to Stanford and stayed in a dorm, but she couldn't play on the golf team because she was a professional golfer at that point. I just think that they've dug into the collegiate model so far that they've completely lost the plot of what would be good for their own sports.
One of the things I think the challenge is here is in who you talk to. Because if you talk to athletic directors, and if you talk to coaches, and if you talk to people who spend their entire day running and operating in college athletics, I think most of them would legitimately agree with you. But when you talk to university presidents and you talk to university general counsel, and you talk to the people that end up voting on these big picture NCAA committees, one, you have folks who are not nearly as informed about the day-to-day of how everything works, but they also realize that if for every inch that we give, we potentially lose ground to draw a line somewhere else.
Right.
And I think there are so many people who are so steadfast in trying to prevent employment generally that they're afraid to make common sense concessions elsewhere, and that kind of led us into this NIL problem to begin with. I think that's what led the NCAA to, after they lost O'Bannon, to decide to keep appealing and
right.
go into Alston and go into the Supreme Court. If they have, I think, have listened to some of these white papers from the early 90s and late and early 2000s, a lot of these problems could have been headed off. But that's, the hindsight's 2020.
Yeah, it's or hindsight's 50-50, as Cam Newton once said. All right, final question, and I'm going to go to the video game here. Is there NIL in the video game? There should be.
There is. There's not a whole lot of NIL in the Dynasty mode, and I had developers tell me it's because we couldn't code a system for Dynasty mode recruiting because the NIL regulations changed every 3 months.
Right.
So it was impossible to do it, but it's a major part of Road to Glory, which is the mode where you start off as a high school recruit and play through your entire career. I think one of the kind of fun things about NIL there is like you have to decide how much time you want to spend on stuff during the week, right? Do I want to spend time on studying?
Right.
Do I want to spend time on rest and recovery? Do I want to spend time on NIL? And if you become an influencer, if you expand your brand, you might be able to sign NIL deals that give you stat buffs during games, right? You might sign an NIL deal with a massage therapy company that helps you recover from big hits a little bit faster. But there's a push and the pull, right? Because every minute you're spending signing autographs or tweeting is a minute you're not in the playbook. The same push and pull that all of us face here whenever we decide to get on Twitter for our jobs.
That is so funny. Is there a portal?
Yeah, there is.
God.
It's huge. Yeah, at the end of every season, you can decide in Road to Glory to hit the transfer portal and see who else is interested in you. And this portal is a critical part in recruiting if you're doing a dynasty. You won't be able to build a roster without it.
See, these are the things that I'm interested in, not the realism of the game, not the, actually playing the game. I'm interested in these types of things. Matt Brown, Extra Points, at Matt Brown EP. I thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks, my friend. Take care.